Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I am your host, as always, Nathan, and today we are going to be discussing the 2023 Michigan Wolverines quarterback room. Starting off with the starter, J.J. McCarthy. He's the starter. He's not going to get usurped by anybody. There isn't a quarterback battle. When you look at him as a player, his best traits are his arm strength, his legitimate mobility, and leadership qualities. He's a very physically talented quarterback. He was a five-star prospect for a reason. I actually think, much like what Jaden Davis is doing right now, Michigan's quarterback commit for the 2024 recruiting class, in the sense that he was a five-star on two of the four major sites and a four-star on the other two, and in the composite, he was one of the two or three highest ranked four stars in the entire country. I actually believe J.J. McCarthy was the highest ranked not five star. I could be wrong though. As far as the negatives, these are all things that could obviously change this year. They're not death sentences or anything, but he is a bit of a gunslinger and a risk taker in the sense that he does kind of sling it when they let him, and it gets him in trouble. If you want proof of that, basically look at any time he's been asked to throw the ball a whole lot, whether that be Maryland early on in the season, where he was playing very tentatively because he knew he couldn't afford an interception, or TCU at the end of the year, where he knew he had to make plays but kept throwing interceptions anyway. The biggest one for me is that I haven't seen it out of him yet. This is me personally. I haven't seen anything out of him that makes me think he's going to be that guy at the quarterback position. All of that could change. I said the same thing, just to use this as an example. I didn't think LSU, the year with Joe Burrow when they won the national championship, I thought they were going to go 8-4. I didn't think they were going to be very good because the previous year, Joe Burrow didn't play very good. I hadn't seen it out of him yet. So all of that can change within a year or two of development and getting some solid coaching and perhaps a scheme change. So it's not the end of the world if I haven't seen it from him, but I haven't seen it from him yet. Moving on to his projected stats, I think this is a realistic outcome. I do think he's going to improve, but I do think you're going to see a lot of the problems that I have highlighted here in terms of the risk taking and that getting him into trouble sometimes. My projected stats around 3,000 passing yards, 500 rushing yards, and 25 passing touchdowns and another 6 rushing touchdowns with a completion percentage of 65% and 12 interceptions, probably something like 15 turnovers maybe. I think this is going to be more of an early season issue with him because when the game does matter, I do think he will pull back a little bit. He did show that ability if you look at the Ohio State game, if you look at the first half of the Iowa Big Ten championship game, he did sort of hold it back a little bit, only really made a few throws during both of those games that could have been considered risky, but those were risks that were well timed and needed at the time. So he does know when to pull it back a little bit, but he kind of struggles with it at times because on the two opposite ends of that spectrum, the TCU game, where he was just slinging it, and he should have probably he had 2 interceptions that were both pick sixes. Probably should have had another 3 turnovers in that game, passing the ball. He threw some very ill-advised passes in that game, and it was a little bit concerning because if he plays a bit more conservative and TCU doesn't have those 2 pick sixes, Michigan wins that game by double digits. Not to say that the game was on him in any way. It wasn't. The 2 pick sixes were probably the defining reason Michigan lost that game, but it was like 10% of the reason that they lost that game. These are just what I think is probably a realistic expectation of a somewhat good option. It's not the floor, but it's certainly not the ceiling either. This is just sort of what I feel like it's going to be. I do think Michigan is going to pull back on the run game a little bit this year. It's something that's been talked about how they're going to trust JJ to throw the ball more. I don't think it's going to be 50-50. There have been some quotes coming out from the coaching staff that says that they're going to try to be 50-50. I don't believe that for a second. I think a best case scenario, JJ plays really well, and you're looking at 55 run, 45 pass. But with that, I do think he could get to around 3,000 passing yards and have a good season. This is the ceiling for his stats. 3,800 passing yards, 700 rushing yards, 40 passing touchdowns, and 10 rushing touchdowns, with a completion percentage likely around 68%. And I think he's still probably going to end up with at least 7 interceptions and maybe a fumble or 2 on top of that. This is not like a cumulative thing. Like, I don't think that if everything goes well, this is what his stats are going to be. I think the 700 yards and 10 rushing touchdowns on the ground is if he kind of struggles in the passing game. And if he doesn't struggle in the passing game, then his rushing yards, rushing touchdowns are going to go down probably even less than what I'm projecting it to be. If he can throw 3,800 yards and 40 touchdowns, he's not going to run the ball very much. So this isn't like a actual projection, unlike the previous screen. This is legitimately the ceiling. Like, he could break every single Michigan passing record, single season passing record this year. That is his ceiling. Sharon Moore is a very good play caller, I believe. There was a rumor going around. I saw it on Twitter. I don't know if it's real or not, but the rumor was that Sharon Moore was a between the 20s guy, and Matt Weiss was the if we're backed up inside our own 20 or if we're in the red zone guy. And that was sort of how they divided it. It wasn't really a pure run or pass sort of play calling situation. So I'm hoping Sharon Moore will be able to not suck at his job like Matt Weiss does, or at least based off of that rumor on Twitter. Matt Weiss was not very good because Michigan was horrible in the red zone last year. So hopefully Sharon Moore will be able to get that going. What's on the table for JJ this year? Like, what legitimately could he achieve as far as trophies and records and the NFL draft? He could break every single University of Michigan passing record. I've already kind of talked about that, but Michigan's passing records are kind of not great anyway. Like, Ohio State's 13th best passing season from a quarterback would obliterate Michigan's. The Peyton Manning Award, which is given out every year to the best quarterback in college football, I believe it replaced the Davey O'Brien Award. The Heisman Trophy, the Walter Camp Award, as well as a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. He's not going to be the number 1 pick of the draft. He's not going to usurp Drake May or Caleb Williams unless one of them gets hurt or doesn't declare this year. But he could legitimately become the QB3 of this draft class and a top 5 pick if everything clicks and it all goes well. That's what's legitimately on the table with him. We're talking about what might be the most physically talented quarterback that Michigan has ever had on their roster. Now, if you want to go back before 2000, at least of my lifetime, I should say, if you want to go back before 2000 and throw out some names that I don't know, that's perfectly fine. But he's more talented than Devin Gardner. He's more talented than Chad Henne. He's more talented than Jar Navarra. He's more talented than Jake Rudock or Denard or anything. So JJ is the guy that is going to elevate this program if this program is going to get elevated, in my opinion. The real question is who's going to be the backup to JJ in case something happens. And there are 3 contenders in my mind, in Jack Tuttle, Davis Warren, and Alex Orji. Starting off with Davis Warren, his biggest pros was that he was the backup last year, and based off what I've seen of him on film, he hasn't put a whole lot on film, but what I've seen on him has been pretty impressive. I think he could be a starting QB on a group of 5 team. I don't think it would be the end of the world if he had to come in and play for a game or 2 or 3 if JJ ended up like pulling his hamstring or something. So I do think Davis Warren is a quality backup. He might be one of the better backups in all of college football. As far as the cons go, he's not very athletic. He's got a good, not great arm, so we would have to change the system a little bit. Because he wouldn't be able to do the quarterback runs that JJ could do, and he just doesn't have the arm talent to also be able to do a lot of the special sort of on-the-move type of stuff that JJ can do as well. And the last thing is that he hasn't ever started a game, as far as I'm aware, so he is a little bit unproven. Jack Tuttle, he can move legitimately, he can run, he can throw on the move very well, shown some high levels of accuracy, and he's had some real experience in Power 5 football games. I do believe he started several games 2 years ago at Utah. He did not necessarily look good in those games, which is, we'll go to the cons right here. He didn't exactly play well in those games. When he did have the extended playing time, I believe he threw for like 400 yards in 2 games with 2 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. So a lot of that to me had more to do with the fact that he was playing above his means. And what do I mean by that? I mean, he's trying to play like a quarterback that is more physically talented than he actually is. He's trying to play like a Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and he just doesn't have the capabilities of doing that. That was something for NFL guys. That was something that Jordan Love was also criticized about when he came out of the draft. He was playing above his means, and that got him into trouble sometimes. When you look at his turnovers in those few games that he played, a lot of them were just bad decisions. It wasn't like he was trying to necessarily do anything, or it was a lack of talent where he made the right read but he just didn't have the talent to get it there. It was really timing and or making a bad decision. Last little thing is that he does have a slight frame. That's just the scout coming out in me. So injuries could potentially be a concern if he was playing a whole lot and he was going to be running a whole lot, which he would, because I don't think Michigan would have to necessarily change a whole lot in terms of the actual structure of the offense if he were to come in, which is probably his biggest pro. Last one is Alex Orji. Pros. He has a rocket launcher attached to his right arm. He has the best arm talent of any quarterback currently on the roster. He might be the best athlete on the roster, period, regardless of position. And this bro is built like a brick shithouse. He hit people last year. We all remember that time where he was running the sideline and just decked a dude. Was that in the spring game? I don't remember. But this is a legitimate guy who could be a problem running the football. He has all the talent in the world. He has legitimate first-round quarterback talent. You wouldn't have to change the scheme at all if he was going to be the one that was going to come in and play for J.J. McCarthy, because he does have the arm talent to make all the throws that J.J. could make and to do them on the run. And he could be the running threat that J.J. is, maybe even better, because he might be, in terms of straight line speed, faster than J.J. I think it's pretty close, but I would probably give the edge to Orji. As far as the cons go, he's going to struggle with all the things that big-armed, athletic QBs struggle with. And that's layering of passes. When do you take the mustard off of the throw? When do you gun it in there? When do you go 50%? When do you go 70%? That's what I mean when I'm saying layering passes. It's one of the hardest things for quarterbacks to learn. It's not necessarily a necessary thing to be productive at the college level, but it is at the NFL level. Like, Baker Mayfield couldn't layer passes for shit at Oklahoma, and he won the Heisman Trophy. But he also didn't have the arm strength that Alex Orji has. So the bigger your arm, the more necessary it is to understand how to layer passes. For what it's worth, that is also something that Joe Milton struggled greatly with. And Joe Milton is basically just bigger, better arm strength version of Alex Orji, except for I think Alex Orji is actually probably faster than Joe Milton. And that's not an insult to Alex Orji. I think Michigan gave up on Joe Milton a little bit too much. I think he's probably going to have a pretty good to great year at Tennessee this year, but that's beside the point. As far as other stuff that he's going to struggle with is when to slide and when to not to slide. This is something that JJ struggled with until the second half of last year, where he really started to understand, like, oh, I can't be taking these hits. But then also he had that run in the Ohio State game where he wasn't going to get out of bounds and he wasn't going to get the first down if he slides. So he just stuck the shoulder down and ended up getting like 10 more yards than he probably should have on that play. So when do you slide? When do you not? That'll be something that he'll also struggle with, because he wants to hit people. That's the first instinct, pretty much. If you're a big guy like him, that's the first instinct, is just truck a dude. But you got to know when to take that risk and when to not to. And the last thing is accuracy. I imagine, I actually haven't seen him throw the ball a whole lot, but because he wasn't the backup last year, because it was the more accurate quarterback at Davis Warren, I imagine accuracy is going to be a little bit of a problem. It does come down to layering passes. How to time them is another big part of accuracy, and that's just something that you're going to get through experience. So who wins? Who's going to be the backup quarterback? Well, I'm not going to give you a definitive answer because I think the answer is malleable. I think there are two answers. JJ goes down with a minor injury, like he pulls his hamstring and he's going to be out the second half of this game and maybe next week. Then it's probably either Warren or Tuttle. Me personally, I would probably prefer Warren, but Tuttle would be the safer option because you don't really have to change the game plan or the offensive scheme as much as you would with Warren. But if he goes down with a major injury, God forbid, tears his ACL or his Achilles or sprains his ankle and he can't move for 6 weeks, it's probably going to be Alex Orji. And the reason for that is, let's put him on tape. Let's see what we have in him. JJ could go pro anyway, even if he gets hurt. If he looks really good in the first half of the year, rolls his ankle, doesn't get to come back for the Big Ten championship game or the bowl game or whatever, but then gets healthy in February or whatever, he could still declare for the draft and go into the draft. So let's see what we have with Orji the rest of this year. Also, another aspect of that thought process is going to be, can Davis Warren or Jack Tuttle win you a football game? Can they actually go out, put together a drive, play above and beyond, and beat a football team? And the answer to that question is probably no, not at this level. But Alex Orji has that kind of talent to potentially be able to do that. And that is all that I have for you today. Go ahead and like if you liked the video. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. If at any point in the video you disagreed with something that I said, let me know down in the comment section below. But let's go ahead and keep it civil. After all, what do I know? I'm just some asshole.